Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, you're welcome, and if you're a returning subscriber, you're welcome as well. So in today's video, we are going to learn how to make a corset with a bra cup. So if this is something you would like to learn, kindly watch this video to the end. So let's get right into the video. So right here, I have my pattern paper, and then I have the bra cup here. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is to mark out the starting point. Okay, and this is my starting point here now. So what I'm just going to do is to mark out half an inch. I'm going to mark half an inch inward. You can see what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to mark it. So that half an inch is going to serve as the bust separation. That's the space at the middle of the corset. That's what the half an inch is going to stand for. So I'm just going to highlight the starting point line so that it's visible for you to see. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to place the bra cup where I have the half an inch mark, and each side of this bra cup should be touching that starting point line. Okay, you know, the other starting point is going to be touching that half an inch, while the other line should also touch the starting point line. I mean, the other side should touch the starting point line. Now, before I mark out the cup, I'm just going to go in and take in like half an inch dart at the lower part of the cup. You can equally take it at the upper part of the cup, but I'm just going to be taking mine at the lower part of the cup. And then I'll also mark about 1.5 inches. So that 1.5 inches I marked upward is where my dart is going to stop, as you can see. So I'll just take this to my sewing machine now and do it for the two bra cups. So I'm done taking the dart for the two bra cups, as you can see. So after that, the next thing I'm going to do now is to place the bra cup back to the paper, and then use my marker to mark it out. So you're just going to place your bra cup the way I'm placing it, like this, and then you use your marker to, you know, to draw out the shape below the bra cup, just like I'm doing right now. Make sure you don't press the cup down too much so that it won't look wide. Okay, don't press it down too much. So I'm just going to blend that line that looks bent. I'm going to blend it very well. So this is pretty much everything about the bra cup. It is very easy to make. As you can see, it's very easy to make. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to mark my underbust. Now, where the bra cup stops below is now going to serve as my underbust. So I'm going to place my underbust mark on it, which is 12 inches. And from there, I'm going to mark the top length, and I'm using 20 inches for the top length. And right now I'm going to mark my top length of 20 inches. So once I was done, the next thing I'm also going to do right now is also to mark the waistline. You can also mark out your underbust, you know, as a straight line, and then you also mark out the waist. So I'm marking my waist 15, and I'm also going to roll the mark. So right here is my waistline and my top line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place the bra cup back there and then measure the bust measurement. Okay, this is how you're going to do it. You can see how I'm placing my tape rule at the center of the paper, not at the half an inch that I took inward. You're going to be taking the mark from the center of the paper. Okay, so and then you're going to mark out your bust measurement plus the joining allowance. So I'm going to do the same thing for the underbust as well. I'm going to take my underbust plus the sewing allowance as well, and I'll also repeat the same thing for the waist measurement, quarter of the waist measurement plus the seam allowance, and I'll do the same thing for the top length as well. and then I'll go ahead and mark all the lines together. So right here, this is my own shape. Your shape might be different from mine. Now I'm marking half an inch sewing allowance all through because I'm not going to be cutting exactly on that mark. So that mark where I use my red marker is where I'm going to be cutting. Okay, that is going to serve as the seam allowance. So this is my front pieces. So I'm going to use these front pieces to cut the back as well. So I'm just placing the back pattern paper here, and I want the back to have a loop. So I want the back to have a loop, so which means I'm not going to be having any zipper allowance at the back. Okay, I won't be having any zipper allowance at the back. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to mark 2 inches, 2.5 inches inward on the front pattern so that I can use it to fold in the front pattern, to also use it to cut the back pattern. So you can see what I'm doing right now. I'm folding this by 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to use it to cut the back pattern. Okay, because if I cut it in full, I won't have any space for my loop. So that was why I mark out 2.5 inches. So right here, I'm marking half an inch. That half an inch is just going to serve as the joining allowance for the back. That is, I'm going to use it to join to turn the lining and also the loops, as you can see. So I'm just going to fold this back now, and it's going to be at the back of the half an inch sewing allowance. Okay, and then I'm going to use that pattern to cut out the back. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do right now is just to cut out the back pattern. So right now I'm going to cut out the back pattern, and then I'm tracing all the lines out. I'm cutting on the red line. So I'll just take the back pattern, I'm going to label it back, and then I'll set it aside. So once I'm done, the next thing I'm going to do is also to cut out the front pattern as well, and I'm also going to be cutting. Okay, so I just want to extend this line. That's the place I'm going to be cutting from, and then I'm going to cut. I'll be cutting on the red mark. So right now I'm done cutting the front pattern and the back pattern, and the next thing I'm going to do now is to use this pattern to cut out the fabric, and then I'll come back and show you guys what it looks like. So right now I'm going to be marking 12 inches as length and 6 inches as the wideness. Remember, this is going to be on fold, so that once I open it, that is going to be 12 by 12 inches. Okay, so right now I'm also folding it again the second time, and then I'm going to be marking 6 inches all around. So right now I'm only cutting one of the bra cup cover, so I'm going to use this to cut the second one. So right now I've also used this to cut the other circle, and this is what I have. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to determine the center of this circle, and once I determine the center, I'm going to be marking 1 inch upward and 1 inch downward. Okay, this is the center, 1 inch upward, 1 inch downward, and I'm going to connect it to the center point just to give it the bust type of shape. So once that is done, I'll just go ahead and cut this out. All right, I'm also going to do the same thing for the other fabric. So I'll equally cut the lining the same way I cut out the fabric. So right now I've ironed my stay on both the fabric and the lining, and you can see the fabric I cut out for the bra cup. I've gone ahead to join it together at the side where I cut off the 1 inch upward, 1 inch downward, and I also ironed my stay on it. After sewing, I went ahead to notch it and then iron it flat, as you can see. So the next thing I'll do now is to pick my bra cup and place it inside the fabric. So I want the part that has pattern to be on top. So but the first thing I'll do now is to come down by 1.5 inch on both sides of the cup, and that 1.5 inch mark, I'll also do the same thing at the back of the bra cup as well. So the seam on the bra cup fabric, the fabric I want to use to cover the bra cup, the side where I have the seam is where that is going to be touching the mark I made on the bra cup. You can see what I'm doing right now. I just did this so that the two bra cups are going to align. Okay, the fabric are going to align on them. So what I'll go and do now is to pin the fabric down. I'm going to be pinning it all the way around, and then go ahead and sew the edge of the bra cup on the fabric. So right now I've gone ahead to sew the bra cup on my machine, and what I will do now is to start cutting the excesses I have. So while I'm cutting the excess, I left about 1/4 inch sewing allowance. Remember, the bra cup has a flat surface on it. That's about 1/4 inch allowance already, and I'm also going to be using my fabric to create another 1/4 inch allowance to make it 1/2 inch. So as I'm cutting it now, I'll also do the same thing for the bra cup as well, and then I'm going to use this to also cut out the lining. So you should have something as beautiful as this once you are done. All right, so the next thing for me now is to also use the cup to cut out the lining. So I've gone ahead to pin my lining down, and I'll also cut off the excesses I have. And just like we left 1/4 inch allowance for the fabric, you also leave the same thing on the lining. So after doing this, I'm also going to use the lining to cut the second lining, okay, because everything should look the same. So I'm just pinning down to also cut off the second lining. This is how you're going to do yours when you're cutting. So this is what I have after cutting the lining and the bra cups together. So the next thing is to create where I'm going to be putting my boning casing. So to do that, just fold this into two, and then you fold it again where you have the side where you are going to be inserting your cups. Okay, then you notch the center up there, and you also notch the center down there, which I've already did. You also notch the center of the front, both the up and down of the center of the front. So after doing that, I'll just go ahead and use my chalk to highlight all of the places I notched. So you can equally just create another mark for your casing depending on how many boning channel you want, but I'll just stick to these three I have. So I'm going to do the next thing for the back as well. So from the center of the back, I'm going to be marking 1 inch. Remember, 1/2 inch is for joining allowance, so I marked 1 inch from there, and from that 1 inch I also marked 3 inches. So I'm alright guys, so I've gone ahead to stitch the bias on both the front and the back pieces of this fabric, you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to take the bra cup, and I'm going to be sewing the bra cup, the two bra cup, all around the fabric. So the first thing you do now is to pin it around, just like I'm doing now, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So I'll go ahead now and stitch it down, and I'll repeat the same process for the lining as well. So guys, I've gone ahead to stitch down the bra cup. If you have any excess around there, you can just trim it off. So I've done the same thing for my lining, and this is what I have for my bra cup and for the fabric and the lining. So the next thing I'll do now is to place the back on top of the front fabric. Okay, I'll place it on top of each other like this and go ahead and pin it down. After pinning down, then I will go ahead and take the stitching allowance for both sides of the fabric. I will also repeat the same thing for my lining as well. Okay, everything I did on the fabric, I'll repeat the same thing on the lining. So guys, I'm just cutting off the excess after stitching the two sides of the fabric together, and then I'll stitch the excess on the lining. So the next thing is to attach my boning. So I've gone ahead to cut out my boning off camera. Just make sure your boning is 1 inch shorter than the actual length. So the ones that fall under the bra cup is going to be 1/2 inch shorter than the actual length. So I've inserted my boning to all of the channels. All right, so the next thing I'll do now is to put the loop. Okay, the loop I'm going to use for tying the rope at the back. So I'm just marking the line, and then I'm taking half an inch up, half an inch down, which is going to serve as the sewing allowance. All right, so from there now I'll start taking 1 inch interval for each of the loop. I'm going to be creating 1 inch interval. All right, so I'll repeat the same thing for the other side as well. All right, so the next thing now is to also cut out the strap. So I've gone ahead to cut out a long strap, and the width is 1.5 inch. So, and then I stitch it together. So I'm going to be cutting 2.5 inches, which is going to serve as the loop. So the 2.5 inches I cut out, I will fold it into two like this, and then I'm going to be sewing it on the marks I made. Okay, just watch what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to be sewing it down. So I'm going to be attaching it to all of the marks I have around there, and I will do it for the other one too. So I've gone ahead to stitch it down. You can see how I stitch it down, and I've done the same thing for the other side as well. Okay, so the next thing now is to go and sew my lining on the fabric. Okay, I'm going to be starting from the top of the top, which is the neck area, and then I'll also stitch it at the lower part, and then also stitch it at the two sides of this corset. And make sure your lining is about half an inch shorter than the main fabric. So I'm going to be creating an opening on one side of the lining, which is where I'm going to be turning the corset from, because I'm going to be doing an inseam finishing. Okay, so I'm going to create about 4 inches opening there. I'll go ahead now and stitch it together and bring it back for us to see what it looks like. So I've gone ahead to stitch the lower part, the upper part, and the two sides of the corset. I've gone ahead to stitch it down. So remember the opening I said I am going to be creating on one side of the lining. So I'm going to be turning the corset out from this opening. It is very, very difficult because of the boning, but at the end you're going to get a very, very nice finishing. So I'll just go ahead now and turn it out. So after turning it out, you should have something like this. All you need to do is just use your hand needle to close the opening. Okay, use your hand needle to close the opening, and once you are done, give it a good press. Okay, iron it well, and you will have something like this. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, share this video. Okay, please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.